Hey guys, I'm Kyanne. I'm 16 years old, and today I'm going to be teaching how to make a simple dice game. So, for this, we're going to be using HTML, a little CSS, and a little bit of JavaScript. So, if you don't already have a REPL account, then go make one. But if you do, then we're just going to start with making a new REPL. So we're going to be using the HTML, CSS, and JS one, and you can name it whatever you want. Okay, so for our dice game, we're going to start with making our dice and a little button that we can click on to roll the dice. So we're going to start with a div tag, and again, a tag, you just start with a less than sign, and then you have the tag name, and then a greater than sign. And then you end it, and don't forget the backward slash. So this is going to be our dice, and we're going to give it an ID of dice. And then underneath it, we're going to have another div with an ID of button, and this is going to be the button that you can click on to roll the dice. So we're going to put in here roll dice or something like that. And we're going to have an on click on this div so that when we click on it, then we'll have a function happen. So to do this, we're just going to write on click equals, and you can name your function whatever you want, so I'm just going to name mine roll. And this is all of the HTML that we're going to be writing for this. So right now, all we have is this roll dice thing. So we need to style the stuff so that we can actually see what it's going to look like. So for our dice, let's give it a height of 100 pixels and a width of 100 pixels. And let's give it a border of 1 pixel solid black. So this is going to be our box that when we click on this, then there will be a random number that shows up in here. So for our button, let's style it to have a border of 1 pixel solid black. And how about let's make it have a hover. So you can add hovers to your divs or your elements in HTML. That way, when you hover over it, then it changes, and so you know that you're hovering over it. So we're going to make it have a cursor effect. Go to a pointer. So now, when I hover over this box, I'll have that little mouse pointer thing. Now, let's make this centered, because it's just in the left corner, and it would look better if it was centered. So, on our body, we're going to give it a width of 100% and a height of 100 view height, so that it takes up the whole screen. So when we style it, we're going to say display flex and align it all center. And you can learn more about like the different flex things that you can do spelled this wrong. Okay, there we go. So, there's another flexing that you can use called flex direction, and you can have it in a column or a row. That way, our things will stack on top of each other. So, we have this all set up, but when we click on it, nothing happens, right? So that's where we're going to use the JavaScript and write our function to make it work. So, in JavaScript, you can create things called variables. We just use var for short. But we're going to create a variable called dice, where we go and we say document dot get element by ID, and it was called dice. So what this is doing is we're creating a variable called dice, where we're going into our HTML and getting the element with an ID of dice. And that way we don't have to write that super long thing, and we could just say dice. And we're going to do that for our button too. That makes it a lot easier when you're writing your functions and stuff, so you don't have to write this super long thing. So now, what we're going to do is we're going to create our onClick function. So, we're going to say function, and we named our function role. So we're making a function, and it's saying when we click on this button, then we're going to do something. So let's just say dice.inner HTML equals 1. And let's see what happens. So, when we click on this, something doesn't happen because it's broken. And it's because role is not defined. Because I spelled function wrong. So now, if we click on it, we have a 1, and it showed up. So all we have to do now is get a random number, and then make it so when we click on the button, it pulls up that random number. So, there's this thing that you can use in JavaScript where it gets a random number. So we're going to make a new variable called number, and it equals math.random, and let's see what that does. It pulls up a 1 because we didn't change this. So we have to change this to number, and that way the internet HTML of dice is going to equal a random number. And right now, what this function does is it gets a random number from 0 to 1, and that's why we have this super long decimal. So to change this, there's another function we can use called math.floor, which rounds your number to the lowest number it could be. So for this, it would go to 0 or something like that. And so what we need to do is times it by the highest number we want it to go to. So if we want it to go to 6, we would times it by 6. Except for if we times it by 6, then it's going to get a number from 0 to 5 because it's rounding down. So we're going to have to add 1 to it. And now, if we click on it, we should get a number I forgot parentheses. So now, if we click on it, we should get a random number from 1 to 6. It works. So what we have here is we created a variable called dice, and we got the element, created a variable called button, and we got the element, and we have an onClick function, so where we click on the button, then we get a random number from 1 to 6, and we set the inner HTML of our box to that number. And now I think I'm going to style this because I want the number to be in the center. So to do this, we can just copy this flex that we have here because it does the same thing. So we centered it this way and centered it this way. And I also want my number to be bigger, so I'm going to say font size 30 pixels. I also don't like serif fonts, so I'm going to make my font family to sans serif. And the button right here that says roll dice looks kind of weird because the border is really close to it, so I'm going to give it padding of 10 pixels. That way there will be space. And this box right here is touching the button, which is weird. So I'm going to give it a margin of 5 pixels on both of them. Also, I want to be able to make this look cooler when you hover over it, not just have a cursor. So I'm going to change the background color to black and the color to white. Now, when we hover over it, it looks way cool. And the last thing I want to do is my favorite part because it makes them look very beautiful. I'm going to give them a border radius of 3 pixels. There we go. Now it's done and it's perfect.